absolutely unbelievable that in this day and age, this scenario can even occur. I mean, worst case scenario, just an absolute nightmare.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
I'm JC, welcome back to Confident Real Estate. Unfortunately, today we're going to be discussing a nightmare scenario, a situation that should never have happened. Unfortunately, somebody learned their lesson the hard and very expensive way, and hopefully you'll get something out of it and learn from their mistake so that you're never doomed to repeat the same thing they did. So let's get into it. First and foremost, I just have to clear the air and state that this is not a situation that I was involved in, and it was not a situation any of my clients were involved in. This was a story I heard from a fellow real estate attorney who is a commercial litigator and contract litigator on these types of matters, and they were approached by the person who finds himself in this horrible situation, who was looking for somebody to help them out and guide them through court to try to rectify this or come to some sort of settlement. At the moment, as far as I know, it is still up in the air. It's just unfortunate. So let's just examine what the situation was so that you never find yourself in this exact situation. When you go and buy a property, you're going to have what is called a survey done. You're going to get a title report, and you're going to look to see that the legal description in Schedule A of the title report matches the boundaries that the survey provides. You might get the title report after you've signed the contract and the survey after you sign the contract, but you at least want to put into the contract to make it clear what you're buying. You want to list the tax lot of the property you're expecting to buy, and you want to list the Schedule A legal description of the property attached to the contract. You want to make sure the metes and bounds or legal description of what you're buying matches the general parameters of the lot. If the seller has a prior survey, you want to get that from them. If it's very old or they don't have one, then you want to make sure you understand what that tax lot comprises, and that the tax lot you're buying or lots that you're buying from the seller are what you intended to buy, and not that they are more of the property than you wanted, or in this case, not that they are less than the property you thought you were buying. Either you're going to get a due diligence period built into the contract along with some seller representations about exactly what lot they're buying. You want to get a rent roll from the seller. These are just standard things you're going to get. However, not everybody does that, as is the case in this unfortunate story. Here, the purchaser was buying a property from a seller. It was a 2-building apartment complex. Each building had 30 to 50 units. One building was larger than the other, and there was a parking lot surrounding each of the buildings. In their mind, they were purchasing something that looked like this. But the reality is they were purchasing something that was more along the lines of this. Notice there are 2 separate tax lots. I simplified this because a typical survey looks more like this. As you see, there are multiple tax lots, different dimensions and lines and easements potentially, things that if you're not familiar with how to read a survey may get confusing. So I'll simplify it by going back to this example. As you notice, there are 2 tax lots. The purchaser here thought they were purchasing both buildings and all of the parking incorporated therein with those 2 buildings. But the reality is their contract said they were purchasing, for purposes of this simplified example, they were purchasing lot 2, not lot 1. Again, they viewed the property as looking more like this. Notice that the line between lot 1 and lot 2 has disappeared because the properties were both owned by the same seller, so they treated them as such. The seller even provided the purchaser with a rent roll for both buildings, and it stated the addresses of the two buildings on the rent roll, but it didn't state the tax lots. So the purchaser entered into the contract with a legal description attached to the contract that described one of the lots, not the dimensions of both lots, but there was a rent roll attached that showed the rent roll for all of the apartments and parking, which was an additional rent for both buildings because the seller owned both buildings. But they were not selling both buildings. In the contract, it actually stated they were only selling one of the tax lots. The Schedule A said it's a legal description for the property I'm selling you. And that legal description, if you really read it, was a meets and bounds description of one of the tax lots. So they entered into contract. The purchaser put down the down payment. They go and get the survey done. And the survey comes back and they say, you only did half of the property. You forgot the other half of the property. Seller turned around and said, no, your survey is correct. That is all the property I agreed to sell you. The purchaser thought they were buying two buildings with all that parking for a steal of a deal because the family that was selling had owned the property for a very long time. The rents were under market value. He just felt they didn't really know what they were doing, but the purchaser wasn't really that seasoned themselves, and they hired an attorney who was a friend, who is not really a real estate attorney, just a general practice attorney, and this is the trouble you find yourself in. So the nightmare scenario could have been avoided if they had gotten the proper seller representations, had gotten a due diligence period in order to discover these things by doing a survey and a title report so that they had the ability to get out of the contract during that due diligence period. But they didn't do any of these things, and now they're locked into a contract to buy a property that is half of what they thought they were going to buy. And in the end, it's not really a great deal. So their options are go forward with it and complete the purchase, or work something out to purchase the second building from the seller and hopefully get some kind of deal because of the misunderstanding, although I don't know how realistic that's going to be. It's up to what the seller's willing to give them. And lastly, they walk away and say goodbye to their 10% down payment deposit. And just so we're clear, this is a 7-figure deal. So that 10% down payment is 6 figures. That's a lot of money to say goodbye to. If they buy the property, it's going to throw off all of the returns they were expecting. And I do believe they had co-investors in this deal who probably were sold on the fact that they were getting a great deal on 2 buildings with a lot of additional rent from all these parking spots. And now they're only getting half of that. I hope from this unfortunate example you learned something valuable. Do yourselves a favor. If you need to know more about how due diligence is done and surveys and title reports, click the link below for the entire detailed video I did on due diligence. It's a lot to get through, but it is so vital. Also, if you're wondering what seller representations and contracts are, like I just mentioned, click the link below so that you have an understanding of what those are, because I did a whole video on seller representations in contracts that's a little bit long but very detailed and super important. Take the 20 minutes to watch each of those videos or whatever they are so that you don't find yourself being the subject matter of a video like this one. Again, I hope you found it informative. Please don't forget to hit like so the YouTube algorithm is happy, and please hit subscribe so that you can continue to get more of our great content as it comes out. We appreciate it. I hope you never find yourself in this type of situation. Just keep educating yourself on what you need to know before you blindly walk into a deal. Hire an attorney to give you the peace of mind to rest at night, and that way you'll have more confidence. Because again, confidence will help you get to that next level. Take care.